What is up, everybody, and welcome to April. And it is a new month, which means it's a new focus. I try to categorize my months so we can kind of get into certain parts of the world more in depth. If you've never been here, this is where all the ladies at. It is Monday, which means it is myth time. On Mondays, I cover myth and legend, women in myth and legend, of course. And on Thursdays, I cover women in history. This month, the topics are all kind of, they're different but very cool. For myth, we're going to look at Illyrian goddesses, and Illyria is basically like the Balkan Peninsula, the Eastern Adriatic, and we'll talk a little bit more about where Illyria is. I traveled all through that region, and it's absolutely amazing, and it's, one of the best places I traveled. It wasn't what I expected, and it wasn't like the place that I thought I'd love the most, but man, Balkan and the Slavic countries, like, if you get to travel, I know it's cool to go to Paris and Madrid and all those places, and I say go because they're cool, but if you get a chance to go to Albania, Montenegro, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, all of them, I highly suggest go because they're absolutely amazing. But this isn't a travel podcast. Maybe someday I'll do a travel podcast. We'll see how that goes. Because I do love to travel, and I in fact do not live in the United States, so obviously I love to travel a little bit. But yes, so myths are going to be Illyrian goddesses, and then for the historical part, we're going to look at warrior queens or queens who made a big impact. Some of those names that you're going to hear is actually an Illyrian queen called Tuta. We're going to talk about Tomiris. We're going to talk about Tamar of Georgia, and then Kubaba, which was a Mesopotamian goddess. Not goddess, but, well, she was elevated to a goddess. She was a queen that became a goddess. So, pretty darn cool. And that's kind of what April is going to look like, guys. So, I'm super stoked. If you guys did not celebrate Women's History Month with me, go back, check those out, because there's some badass ladies. In fact, I say if this is your first time seeing my face or hearing my voice, go back, check out my back catalog. Some of the first couple were rough, but I think I'm starting to get the groove. I hope so, because I really would like to make this more of my business. I love learning and sharing. That's kind of what I'm here to do, I think, in life. So with that being said, you're probably like, who the hell are you? Well, I'm Kim. I am the host of this podcast and another podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip, and I am a history nerd, I am a writer, I am a teacher, I am a coach, I am all those things, and I am a feminist, and I'm proud to say it. I'm not scared to say it. In this day and age, maybe some people might be starting to get a little scared with the crap that's going on in the world, but hey, that is for another time. And I will say, on the myth episode, I don't get too political, but if you pay attention to the history portion, I might get a little bit political occasionally, just as a warning. So if you're not into that, I'm a feminist. I believe everybody deserves to be who they are. I believe people deserve to love who they love, and I believe people deserve to worship who they want to worship. And if none of that sounds cool to you, then it's going to be a rough haul for us. So stick around if you want, but just know those are kind of the things that I stand up for. And I do believe in gender equality, and that's for all genders, not just two. So if that's something you're not okay with, that's cool. You have a right to your opinion, but I think if you want to stay around, you might be a little uncomfortable sometimes when I go into my rants. Anyways, that's just a public service announcement. Before we jump into the first Illyrian goddess, which is Anzotica, and I think I'm saying that right, who is basically like the Venus of the Illyrians. We're going to do some housekeeping. If you want to reach out to me, you can most definitely do that, please, through my social media, through commenting on the video, I even have an email down there. You can shoot me an email if you like to rock it old school. If you want to support the podcast, there's a couple ways to do that. If you want to kick a little cash my way, that would be awesome. You can do that through my Buy Me a Coffee and my Patreon. If you can't, completely understand. The world is going crazy, and we like to eat our eggs, right, America? Right. So if you can't kick cash my way, just if you would like, please review, share, comment, follow, subscribe, do all those things. Tell your mama about me, whatever you need to do to get the word out. The more the word gets out, the more interaction I get with this, the more the algorithms push me out to new people, so that we can build a community of people that want to talk about badass women in myth, legend, and history. Oh God, if this could be just my job, that would be amazing, because I would die of happiness. I've been a history nerd my whole life. Other than that, if you want more information, I do have a Medium publication that goes out with this, because I am a writer by trade. If you are into magical, mystical, spiritual, wellness, holistic healing, all that kind of woo-woo kind of stuff, that includes tarots, crystals, ley lines. I just did a podcast about Atlantis. Yeah, why not? Then check out my other podcast. It is called Our Mystic Road Trip. And I think that is it for the shameless plugging and housekeeping. So let's jump into Anzotica, the Venus of the ancient Illyrians. Alright guys, so you know me, I talk about some places that maybe we're not too familiar with, right? So we're going to start with who were the Illyrians, and then we'll go into a couple of other things like how women, the role of women in that society, and then we'll talk a little bit about the goddess and kind of wrap it up with a mythological tale of said goddess. So first off, we kind of already talked a little bit about it. Who the frick are the Illyrians, right? You may never have heard of them. I hadn't either until I went through Albania. And then suddenly my eyes were open. I've seen this new, I've heard of Thracians, and I've heard of, Greeks and Romans and all them, but Illyrians I had never, ever heard of. So this is basically, it's a collection of tribes that spread out across the Balkan Peninsula and the Eastern Adriatic. So this includes things, and they really thrived around 2 million BCE. By the way, guys, just as a pause for a second, if you're watching this in some countries, you may be like, what the heck is BCE? Because some countries and some cultures still use BC. BCE is basically just BCE, but it means before Common Era. So that's everything prior to the 1st century. Instead of using BC, which was before Christ prior, academics have taken the religion out and just put before Common Era. I hope that didn't offend anybody, but that's kind of just, I felt like I'm a teacher as also a part of the thing, and I teach young kids here in Georgia, which is a country in the Caucasus, not the state. And they still use BC here because it's a very conservative religious country. So when I said BCE the other day, a bunch of my students were like, I don't know what that means. And so I had to explain it. So I thought, oh, you know what? If I have people listening from countries like that, they may not know either. So I just wanted to make sure everybody is on the same page. So Illyria covered the Balkans, right? This is like Albania, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina. I can never say it. Herzegovina, Slovenia, Montenegro, a little bit of Serbia. But they weren't a unified nation, right? It was just like connected tribes. And every one of the tribes had their own identity, rulers, customs. So it was more like, I guess you would say it was more like a confederation than like an empire, although it was kind of an empire. It was just like a communal empire, I guess, because every tribe had their own thing going on, right? They were really well known for being warriors. They were skilled metalworkers, and for those that were on the Adriatic coast, they were well known for seafaring, right? So for instance, like the Liburnians, they were famous for their naval prowess, right? And the Dalmatae, I think that's how you say it. They were like the fierce fighters, right? They had a lot of interaction with the Greeks and the Romans and the Celts. So sometimes through trade, sometimes that was through trade, and sometimes that was through battle, right? Religious-wise, they were very tied to nature. And most of their deities represented various aspects of life. That's fertility, war, sea, of such nature. There's not a lot of written records about the Illyrians. So we basically have to go off what we've found archaeologically, as well as from accounts from Greeks and Roman writers, to kind of piece together a little bit about the Illyrians. And they're quite complex culture. So that being said, remember anything I say in this is pretty much all conjecture, right? It's what has been found through, as I said, archaeological finds and combing through data and records. What I will say is that I went to several museums while I was there, and the one thing that really stuck out, the metalwork thing that they talked about, oh my God, some of the metalwork was just phenomenal in some of those museums. It's just outstanding. And like I said, I didn't know about the Illyrians till I went to Albania, and I think I was in Tirana, and I went to the big museum there, and it was quite enlightening, and I learned a lot. So once again, not a travel podcast, but if you get a chance, I highly suggest Albania and Montenegro. Those two countries were the main countries I went to in the Balkans. And they were just fantastic. I really, really highly suggest people go to Albania. And if you like, no matter if you like mountains or beaches, they have it all. And their beaches are, if I'm honest with you, they're just as good as Greece, if not better, because they're not as crowded. So, just a saying, if you're looking for some place to travel to, maybe to get out of the United States, because once again, not a travel channel, but what I will say is if you are looking for a place to go outside of the U.S. where the visa is pretty cool, you have Georgia. That's where I am. And then you also have Albania. And both of those places allow you a year on a travel visa. Once again, not a travel thing, but for some reason I feel like I want to tell you guys this, especially those that are in the U.S. Georgia, you can just come here for a year, cross the border, go to another country. It can be for 2 hours, it can be for 2 days, it doesn't matter. Come back, it starts the next year. With Albania, I do believe, and please check this information out because it's always ever changing. With Albania, you can be there a year, but then you have to leave for 3 months before you can come back in. So if you're an American looking for some place to escape to, those two places are good options, and the cost of living is pretty cheap. Okay, now that we're done, and we're not in a travel podcast, but I just felt the urge, and so I go with the flow. Anyways, let's talk about women in Illyrian society. So, Illyrian society was very, very tribal, and so that meant each of the different groups were obviously governed by their own leaders and counselors. So power structures between them obviously varied, right? Some were led by chieftains, others by councils or elders. And there was even a few queens. In fact, one of the people we're going to be talking about on Thursday's episode is one of the most notable female rulers, and that's Queen Tuta. And she led her people against Rome in the 3rd century BCE. Now, we'll talk about her more in depth on Thursday. I don't think it's this Thursday. I think it's next Thursday. But we will talk about her this month. But a women in Illyrian culture kind of enjoyed pretty high status, comparatively to some of the other societies, right? They could own property, they could inherit land, they participated in religious things. They even sometimes had political influence, which I thought was really cool. And that respect in their normal life really translates into their mythology. Goddesses like Anzotica played big roles in the spiritual life, right? They reinforced ideas that women were pretty essential, right? You can't carry on the species without us. Well, right now, maybe in the future, whatever, but right now you have to have us, right? when it came to marriage and family structures, that kind of varied too from place, but women on whole were granted a lot more autonomy than their Greek or Roman counterparts, that's for sure. Illyrian society was patriarchal, of course, but the evidence that they've found kind of suggests that women had a level of freedom, an involvement in community that just was pretty uncommon for that region and that time, right? It was like this balance of power and respect. And it was kind of really unique, especially in that region. You have to think where that region is, right? It is really, really between Greece and Rome, which were like the two big cultural ancient societies, civilizations, right? So now we have a good grasp on where Illyria is, what it is, who they were, especially when it comes to women. So now we're going to jump into the goddess herself, right? So Anzotica, she is the Illyrian goddess of love and fertility. She is basically the Balkan Venus, basically, right? If you were an Illyrian and you were looking for romance, a good harvest, maybe like a little glow up, she would be the goddess you would call on, right? It was, once again, remember there are different tribes. So her worship was pretty localized, and the strongest evidence of where was found in, I'm going to pronounce Ionona. Basically, that's modern Nin in Croatia. And there wasn't a lot of grand temple deities. She was pretty much like woven into everyday life. Household rituals, fertility celebrations, and sacred groves and that kind of thing. With what they have found, oftentimes she's really depicted. There's no definitive statues, there's no exact image, but you will find a lot Illyrian art and mythology where she's like a pretty radiant and ethereal figure, and she's basically divine warmth walking across land. She's often seen with dolphins and swans. Obviously, you can kind of correlate that swans are really representative of like beauty and elegance and grace, and dolphins were looked at as guides of the sea. At this time, there were a lot of dolphins in the sea at this time, and so she's often like maybe thought of like, she may have been depicted with like flowing hair, flowing robes, possibly near water, anything that would really align with her fertility and cycle of life kind of thing. As a goddess of love and fertility, Anzotica could influence human relationships and the land, right? She could bless marriages and romantic unions, grant fertility, heal emotional wounds, control the waters, which especially for Nin and Croatia at the time, they do have coastline, and so it was important there. The Roman Empire began to expand, right? And so obviously at this part of the world was eventually just consumed by the Roman Empire, right? So what happened was a lot of the Roman deities wound up being integrated, right? So Venus became the predominant goddess of love, but even in this region, there were still little hints of Anzotica worship going on, right? Basically, what they did was they took Illyrian and Roman cultures, and that's why maybe Anzotica was absorbed into Roman mythology. And in Roman mythology, it was Venus. In Greek, it was Aphrodite. So what happened was the Romans took the Greek gods, and then as they went through, maybe they absconded with some little pieces of other gods too. So, as I said, her symbols were the swan and the dolphin. And those are both important, so dolphins and swans are both pretty graceful. Romance and harmony, definitely, right? Dolphins were more about nurturing and guidance. Like I said, they were seen as like the the guides of the ocean, the guides of the sea. Because Illyria had a close connection to the Adriatic, it makes sense that their goddess of love would actually be tied to aquatic creatures. And also, if you look at, for instance, like I said, the Greeks had Aphrodite, then the Romans kind of absconded with a little bit of that, and they became Venus, but Aphrodite comes out of a shell out of the ocean, so you can see how that could all be tied together, right? Worship, like, once again, there's not a lot of records, guys, so you can just kind of use a little deduction. Ceremonies and rituals probably happened near water, and they were probably made just to seek her blessings, right? Maybe they were doing prayers for a bountiful harvest. Maybe they were blessing child or their family. Obviously, celebrations for love and marriage were a big thing. Water was a key thing for her. It's the source of life, and so it would make sense that it played a key role in honoring her, especially when it came to helping with sacred situations, purifying. Other things that could have been happening, like flowers, shells, maybe some handcrafted symbols of like swans and dolphins, that could be good. These rituals were probably woven pretty much into their daily life, because, fertility and love are important and vital. So now we're going to talk a little bit about archaeological findings. This is how we kind of can piece together Anzotica and who exactly she was. And I also added this little section. I wanted to talk about a few famous Illyrians, because I want to get through this month everybody kind of understanding who they were. And maybe you've heard of some of these people, or maybe you haven't. But it's really important to understand that even though we may not have heard of the Illyrians, they played a vital role in a lot of things. So there's not really a huge treasure trove of artifacts that are like, this is Anzotica, goddess of love, right? It's not that. So archaeologists have uncovered like altars, reliefs, inscriptions from ancient Illyrian settlements that have a lot of different deities, right? Female figures frequently appear in these findings, and this is really showing that the goddess played a crucial role in Illyrian society. Anzotica, who's associated with love and beauty and fertility, would have been a key person in that lineup. I think as I was doing it, one of the most significant sites that was tied to her was Aenona, as I mentioned, which is Nen in Croatia. Artifacts here show like a blend of Illyrian and Roman influences. So when, like I said, the Roman Empire expanded, they often took to rebranding local gods. And so Anzotica had a lot of similarities to Venus, and so maybe that was just how they kind of, one of the ways conquerors keep their people and everything, or at least good people, right, is that they really look for the religion of the place, and then they either integrate some of that stuff into their worship, or they build temples and things where they're sacred. Now, that's not saying it's a good thing. It's just saying if you're smart, that's what you'll do. Actually, the smartest thing you can do is what Genghis Khan and them did, is that when you come in, you just let people keep worshiping who they're worshiping, just, take control of the reins. Anyways, that's for another day, another time. But yeah, so that way, because they integrated her in, people could still keep worshiping her. So let's talk about the Illyrians. Weren't just worshiping goddesses. Obviously, they had fierce warriors. They had legendary leaders. Queen Tuta, I'm not going to go into too much of her because we're doing a whole show on her. But basically, she was king of the Ardii. I think that's how you tribe. And she fought back against Rome. She's a pretty badass lady, which is why I'm doing a whole episode on her. Another one that might be of interest is Gentius. He was the last king of Illyria, and he tried to resist the Romans, but eventually he just couldn't. He was really well known for his military strategy and resistance, but in the end, Illyria wound up being Roman, right? A lot of these are kings. So another two kings that are pretty prominent are Bardalis and Agron. Agron was actually Tuta's husband, and so on and so forth. So it's just a little glimpse into a couple names that maybe you might want to check out. I know I'm primarily focused on women, but there are guys in history too that nobody knows about. Check them out; they're pretty cool. So let's look at her role. So obviously, Anzotica was ideals of love and beauty, fertility and prosperity. All right. And as I said, it shaped a lot of the things. While much of Anzotica kind of remains a mystery, what we know points to this goddess who was deeply, deeply woven into Illyrian life, and that's pretty cool. So now we've talked about her, we know a little bit about her. Hopefully I've inspired you to go check out more about her. We're going to jump into a mythical tale. Now, please remember, there's not a lot of written details. So basically, this is me looking at the goddess, looking at the history. There are a few tales left around. So I do expand upon some things. So please know that. And this myth is called the Gift of Anzotica. So as usual, grab your beverage of choice, whether that be a cocktail or cocoa, a blanket, curl up, and let me tell you the story of the Gift of Anzotica. By the way, I'm going to be reading it. In the heart of ancient Illyria, nestled between rolling hills and the shimmering Adriatic, lived a young woman named Leora. She was known throughout the tribes not just for her beauty, but for her kindness. While others admired her radiant face, Leora cared more about tending to the sick, feeding the hungry, and ensuring that no child went without comfort. Then came the drought. The rivers shrank into cracked earth. The crops turned to dust, and the laughter of the village grew quiet with hunger. The elders offered prayers to the gods, but the skies remained empty, refusing to shed even a drop of mercy. Leora could not bear to see her people suffer. She walked alone into the sacred grove where the great trees whispered secrets to the wind. She knelt beside a dry stream bed, placed her hands on the parched ground, and prayed to Anzotica, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. "O radiant Anzotica," Leora pleaded, "you who bring life to the land and joy to the heart, hear me now. My people suffer. The rivers are gone and the earth is cracking beneath our feet. I ask not for myself, but for them. Let the waters return so that love, life, and laughter may flow through Illyria once more." A hush fell over the grove. The wind stilled. The very air seemed to hum with anticipation. Then, from the shivering light of the sun, she appeared. Anzotica stood before Leora, her form radiant and ethereal. Swans glided at her feet, their white feathers gleaming, while dolphins leapt in the unseen current around her. Her presence was both powerful and gentle, like the tide itself. "Leora," Anzotica spoke, her voice like the murmur of water, "you ask not for yourself, but for your people. Your heart is as pure as the rivers that once blessed this land. Because of your selflessness, I shall restore what has been lost." She raised her hand, and as she did, the air grew thick with the scent of rain. Dark clouds gathered, rolling over the sky like waves. Then, with a mighty crack of thunder, the heavens opened. Rain poured down from the sky in silver sheets, soaking the thirsty earth. The dry riverbeds filled, rushing and roaring back to life. The fields drank deeply, and almost as if by magic, the first green shoots of new crops pushed through the soil. The land flourished once more. The people of Illyria rejoiced, dancing beneath the blessed rain, their voice rising in songs of gratitude. And in the center of it all stood Leora, her face turned upward, letting the raindrops kiss her skin. From that day forward, Leora was honored as a symbol of love, devotion, and selflessness, just like Anzotica, the goddess who answered her call. Pretty cool. I love this. I love learning new mythology. So hopefully Anzotica inspired you. She's really a testament to the rich cultural history of the Illyrians. Though they're not well known, I think hopefully this little look at them kind of inspired you guys. And as we go through the month, I hope it inspires you guys to even more look into this area, these people, this history, this mythology. It's all pretty amazing. And I'd like to say thank you for joining me. Hopefully you'll come back again and we can build this community. That's it. As always, guys, If you want to reach out to me, you know how to do that. If you want to support the podcast, you can do it financially or just like, follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Get my name and my face out there and my voice out there into the algorithm. If you want more, check out the Meeting publication. And if you want to talk about holistic, spiritual, all that kind of good stuff, check out my other podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip. And that's it for this Mythical Monday. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a great day. And as always, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay curious.